Hi, I'm Sherrie York, a linocut printmaker and the poster artist for the 2020 celebration of World Migratory Bird Day. We're here in my studio on the coast of Maine, and I wanted to share with you a little bit today about the process of making the art for the poster and some of my other work as well. I started work in linocut, or linoleum block printing, more than 20 years ago because it was a low-tech, easy, inexpensive way to get started in printmaking. All you need are some pieces of linoleum, some tools to carve an image, some ink to print with, brayer to roll the ink out with, some paper to print on, and a spoon. For the first 15 years that I was creating prints, I was actually rubbing them, transferring the ink to paper with the use of a spoon. It works great, although after a lot of years it does get hard on the wrists and the shoulders. So a few years ago I did invest in this press, which is great because it lets me use heavier paper and do some larger work. Linocut is a very versatile medium. Images created this way can be simple, graphic designs printed in a single color, or they can be much more complex, multicolor images printed from more than one block, or from a single block in multiple stages. For the WMBD art, I combined printmaking and painting. First, I carved each of the 12 featured bird species from individual pieces of linoleum. Then I rolled ink onto the surface of the block with a brayer. I printed each bird onto heavy watercolor paper. And then I painted them with watercolors. Once all the individual bird images were finished, I painted a map of the world and then joined all these pieces together to create the final design. I like the graphic look of these hand-painted linocuts, but there are other ways to create a multicolor image in this medium. The technique that I use most often is called reduction printing. Now, I don't think I mentioned in the beginning, but we think of linoleum block printing as a relief printmaking process. And if you think of it kind of like a rubber stamp, the surface that's not carved in the linoleum is the surface that's actually going to create the image. Everything that I carve out of my piece of linoleum is not going to print. So the relief or the raised surface is where the ink is applied. In reduction printing, I'm printing all of the colors of my image from a single block in succession. I'm carving away more material at each stage, so I'm reducing the printable surface. That's why it's called reduction printing. Let me show you an example. So the way a reduction print works is that the very first step is to carve away anything that I want to have be white in the final image, or whatever the color of my paper is. In this case, there are just a few areas. This is going to be an image of a laughing gull. So there's some white in the belly and there's a white eye ring. So I carve that away and then I ink the entire block with the first color, which in this case is a pale gray. I print that onto more sheets of paper than I ultimately want prints in my edition because I'm probably going to make mistakes. I might want to test some colors to see if they're the right ones. And I can't go back once I go on because I'm reducing the printable surface. Remember, I'm basically destroying the block as I go along, so there's no going back. So let's say I start with 10 prints. I print this gray 10 times, I clean off the block, and now I carve away any place that I want this first pale gray to show. Then I ink the block with the next color, which is a darker gray, and I print that over the top of the first 10 times. Then I clean off the block, and the next step is to carve away any place I want that second gray to show. And then I ink the block with the third color, in this case a blue, and I print that 10 times. I clean off the block, and at the next stage I carved away all the areas that I wanted to remain blue, but instead of inking the entire block with the next color, I did what's called spot inking, and I just ran a little bit of red in the beak and feet because that was the only place that it needed to show. And so I just did that little bit of inking and I printed those 10 times as well. Then I went on and I took just a tiny bit out of the beak and the feet so that I can get 2 shades of red in one pass here because I'm going to use a transparent darker gray over the entire block, and that helped to tone down the red. So now I've printed that 10 times. I'm ready for the last step, which is the darkest dark. There's all that's left now is the head, the tail, and some parts of the wingtips. Here's what the block looked like at the very end. All that was printed in the last stage was the head and those little bits of the wing. You can see that I still have that some of the rock face there, and then the little border that's all around the top of the image. I just didn't ink that when I went to print the final stage. This is a fairly straightforward little print, but many of my images are far more complex, involving 10 to 15 different color states and color passes. I hope you've enjoyed this little peek into my studio and my process. Thank you for being part of World Migratory Bird Day and for helping to connect our communities across the globe through your enthusiasm for migratory birds.